Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Sharon Florentine. Welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, Confidence and Experimentation with Feature Flags at Metrikus. We have an awesome webinar for you today, as usual, but before we get started, I need to go through some quick housekeeping items with you. First, just a reminder that this session is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it again. We will send you an email with instructions for how to access the webinar on demand, or you can visit us at devops.com/webinars, and it will be there for you as well. We are taking questions from the audience throughout the presentation, so you can use the Q&A tab on your webinar console to submit questions at any time. We will try to get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation, so go ahead and send those in whenever they come to you. And at the end of today's presentation, we are going to do a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So stick around and see if you are a winner. All right. With that, I am pleased to introduce to you today Sam Hall. He's the head of technology at Metrikus, and Ravi Lockman, an evangelist at Harness, the evangelist, apparently. Anyway, I'm going to put myself on mute and turn my camera off and let you get right into it.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. And thank you so much for that introduction. Really excited to be talking to everybody today. And yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm, I guess, the evangelist here at Harness, whatever that means. One, I help kind of build people in technology and get to hang out with cool people like Sam. But Sam, for people who don't know you, maybe a little bit of background about yourself before we can dive in.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I'm the head of technology at Metrikus, which kind of means that most software projects come through me. End up working with interesting people like Ravi and Harness, trying to look at new ways of introducing technology at Metrikus. I'll speak a bit more about what Metrikus is later, but yeah, I kind of work across a whole load of technology spectrum at Metrikus.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. And so what are we going to be talking about today? Well, the first thing we're going to be talking about is, surprise, the scientific method now in software. We're going to go over what exactly is the scientific method. We'll jog back to middle school, just have a quick reminder. And then after that, we're going to hand it over to Sam to talk about just the journey at Metrikus. Actually, I'm very impressed with their journey. It's a very interesting journey. And you could definitely learn a lot from what Sam and team is doing at Metrikus. And then also towards the end, just if you're interested in what we talked about today, well, how do you go about getting started? So let's dive right in. So who here remembers science? Yes, good old science. And so the first thing is the scientific method. So let's jog all the way back to your middle school days or elementary school days or grade school days. The scientific method is basically this. It's an empirical method of acquiring knowledge, right? So what does this mean? You're using data to acquire knowledge. But also part of the scientific method is experimentation, right? So you might say that, hey, we want to prove that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade or 212 degrees Fahrenheit, whoever came up with that, you're going to have to be doing some sort of experimentation, right? You have a hypothesis and you have to test it out by induction, right? And so really observing these particular experiments, that's it, right? It's preaching to the choir here. It's something that we instilled in us early in our education, but then as we march towards software, there's something kind of lost in translation. And so let's make a little bit of an example, right? So where I live in the United States, we're prone to hurricanes, right? And so part of this particular, I would say, the hypothesis-driven business, it has been around for a long time, but let's actually take a look at what you're actually subject to in your, let's say, civilian lives that you can actually bring into the software side of things. So here, we have hurricanes once in a while. It's kind of a way of life, but the grocery stores or grocery chains actually do something very interesting here. So if I had to go run out to like a Harris Teeter or a Publix that there was actually a hurricane that was coming, they actually do something very interesting. They move beer to the front of the store, based on some sort of data that they have. They show that when a storm is coming, people like to buy a lot of alcohol. I can't blame them, right out the storm. But it was a business decision to move beer to the first thing you see. So probably they sell more beer, or they want to get people out of the store quicker, so they're not having like these huge lines and like these like Armageddon type of scenes, like, you know, there's so many people around. But they move beer to the front of the store. And so a couple of things that we'll actually do is, again, like we talked about, is either going to be driving beer sales, right? Or it's going to be driving a number of people or traffic in the store and out of the store. And that's really based on data, right? So, hey, they have shopping data that actually made and baked in that decision. And also, one of the things that, you know, it's important to say, how do they garner or how do they gather that particular data, is that, hey, you know, feedback is important, right? So feedback can be in terms of people, and feedback can be in terms of data, right? And so feedback might be how people are feeling and versus how is something performing. But software is actually quite an interesting bucket there, right? So that with software, what is feedback, right? So what is software feedback? I'll take a minute and just kind of go through this. Unfortunately or fortunately, there's not this little scale, right? Like, you know, like, how am I doing? Am I smiley face? Am I frowny face? There's a lot of the irony of systems and software is that actually software can be quite subjective, right? So like when you do user experience or any sort of like asterisk experience or human factor engineering, is that we're people, and so we're emotional, right? And so we like what makes sense for Sam might be very I might not get like, oh, like this other level of stuff I don't understand, but it's like that, like understanding the user. And this is how it can be very subjective. Even things that are very quote unquote objective. For example, let's say I have a story that I used to work for an investment bank as a dev lead years ago, and you know, my bonus was necessary on me getting features into production, and I would have to revert a lot of times, and I would argue, do I roll back? Do I not roll back? The data says we should roll back, but I don't want to roll back because it's, you know, money will cost me personal money. And again, like, hey, you know, some negotiation that's becoming very subjective. Like, yeah, is the users really impacted or are they not? Yes, they were impacted, but that's just how subjectivity, you know, can kind of start infiltrating in the software world, right? But how do we start gathering that data, right, in software land? And so, you know, there's a couple. If you want to be more objective, right, you might instrument the software. You might get notation. You might look at hard metrics, like, oh, you know what, we can look at metrics around the user journey. We can look at metrics around performance. We can look at metrics about uptime or reliability. We can look at saturation. Like, there's like lots of things that you can take a look at in software land, right? But like, again, this is only capturing the particular objective feedback, right? Like if you look at this dashboard, you know, it's hard to garner sentiment, right? And because like what you don't want to do or don't want to happen is, you know, this is one thing that you need to experiment with, right? How do you get subjective feedback, right? I call it the feels. You know, if people are giving you thumbs down or like you're tweeting meanly about you, or God forbid you end up on a Reddit thread or hacker news or the angry orange site, I call it. It's something that, you know, it's as a software engineer, how do you get that feedback, right? Like sometimes you're pretty isolated from the feedback. Sometimes, you know, unless you're one of those, you build it, you run it. You know, if you're a full stack developer, full lifecycle developer, you know, you build, you run it, you operate it, you write it, vice versa. It's kind of this uneasy feeling like, hey, what's an appropriate way of getting feedback? And so with that, it's, you know what, the whole point of the SDLC is to make a change, right? Or to iterate. And with this, you know, I call it the never stopping, you know, if you're on an active development team or active product team, you're always going to be trying to build something or design a feature or a fix, or just making either, depending if you're a platform engineer, your internal customer or external customer experience better. This is it, right? Like, hey, this is, you know, 2 or 3 week sprints at a time. The grind never stops. But part of this is actually, it's if you wanted to experiment, right? So let's talk about something a little bit more, I would say a little bit more empirical here is that, or intrinsic, sorry. So if you want to some of the hard challenges with experimenting in software land is that you could potentially impact all your users, right? Like, hey, how do you actually get this data back? Or how, I want to introduce a new feature. How do I actually confidently introduce this feature? Now, this comes into a concept called blast radius, right? So with a blast radius, back in the day, right? Like if I had to get user feedback, I didn't want it, because by the time I get feedback, there was a problem, right? Saying, oh, in certain industries, like for example, I have a glucose meter on my arm here. It's, they don't want feedback, right? Like, hey, if they get user feedback, someone might have died, right? Like, and so they have a very big blast radius. And that's also a problem with, let's say, in the development industry at all, is anytime you make a change, you're potentially impacting all of your users, right? So how do you limit that? If I want to experiment, going back to our scientific method, you want to see what temperature water boils at, right? You're not the quintessential, you're not boiling the entire ocean, to see if water boils at, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. You have a little beaker and you fill it up with water and you put it on a hot plate, and, you're able to isolate the blast radius. So the ocean is not on fire. Just your little beaker is on fire. And that is the core definition of having a blast radius, right? And so if you're able to limit the blast radius, you're able to, I would argue that you're able to experiment more, right? And so going back to, hey, I want to garner feedback. I want to try something. This is core to agile development, core to any iterative development exercises. You're able to kind of compress that and say, I'm only targeting certain users, or I'm only targeting certain entitlements. And this is all based, this is my last little part of my spiel here, is that the whole reason why you would want to use a feature flag, or what we're going to be talking about today, what Sam's going to be talking about today, is also you're garnering fast feedback, right? So the quicker you're able to get, let's say, information or data, you'll act on it. Like as engineers, we're natural optimizers, right? Like we're not doing anything nefarious. And so we're only designing and acting on things that we have data on, right? If you look at the entire application development chain, from the product managers to the developers to even the QA organization, it's everybody's kind of acting on the data and decisions that they have. And with the ability to experiment, remember, you're not boiling the ocean, you're just boiling a little beaker. You're able to get empirical data very quickly. But a lot of what I talked about was conceptual. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sam to actually go through what does this actually look like in theory, or actually in implementation. So Sam?
Hey guys. Yeah, so at Metrikus, so first a little bit about Metrikus, so you got kind of some context. In many ways, we do some things in the real world that are similar to feature flags. So let's say you're a business and you want to make some kind of policy change because there might be some sort of major world event that means that your office space needs to have less people in it, or you need to detect air quality changes within a space due to some new regulation. Or quite simply, you've got loads and loads of data and you want to be able to visualize it easier and better to try and make your buildings a bit smarter. We're going to help people to do that, so that then if you actually want that change to be rolled out across, as Ravi was saying, rather than doing that change across everywhere and just saying, hey, did it work? You do it in one building, you boil that beaker, and then you can roll it out across the whole network of spaces that you may have. To do that, we've got quite a broad, adaptable product that allows people to do lots and lots of different things. We have a huge amount of data coming through the platform from, I think we have something like, it's well over 30 different device, integrations that are all, various levels of complexity, lots and lots of data, which has built up this very, very complex data product. So as a quick example, we have a solution that helps you with indoor air quality monitoring, where we'll go and install some sensors into a building to measure some key parameters like temperature, CO2, TVOCs. We then help people to optimize them to improve health and well-being, and sort of set up that feedback loop to make a healthy indoor environment. So again, very similar conceptually to what we're talking about with feature flags, but we try and do that in the smart building world. Now, that kind of got us And we do that with a number of different people primarily in the UK, but we do some stuff in the US as well. But yeah, some of the major names that you may know, like GSK, the Met Office over here, and the NHS. And that kind of got us thinking, if we're trying to help people by making this feedback loop, should we not try and do a similar thing with our software? We obviously had internal tests and beta programs and all sorts, but we weren't testing on our real data set, which made the real testing of features much more difficult. We have very low tolerance for any change failure, because if there's any moment where people lose access to their data, then that immediately reduces trust. We can't. There is no point where we can have a change failure. So in the scenario that, again, Ravi was saying, you need to deploy features quickly. We don't have that. We need to deploy features and they need to work, because otherwise we will lose that data and it's gone. It's gone forever. But we wanted to be able to deploy those features to a selection of customers to be able to get that feedback, so that we could, understand, is this what you needed? Is, when you're looking at your real data, not the fake data that our engineers made, is this actually helpful for you? Can we deploy multiple versions of something, so that it's not just something where we have thought about maybe this way of creating a feature is better versus this way, and we just decide internally? We can try it with real customers, do some A/B testing, do all sorts of different methods. And we also really wanted to give power back to the product team, because at the end of the day, the people who chose whether features were released or not was our engineering team. We released on a Friday at 8 o'clock because that was when there was the least chance of that. If something did go wrong, that blast radius is pretty small because people are asleep or they're not at work. So it's not too bad. And we wanted to be able to deploy things in that sort of non-risky time. So if something goes wrong, it's still not as bad. But the rollout can then be controlled by the product team, synchronized with marketing, allow people to roll out Q&A materials, lots and lots of different things go into releasing a feature, not just does engineering say it works. And so, yeah, we were just trying to improve our deployment speed without increasing that risk of failure and keeping up that, confidence of feature success. So that led us to feature flags. I had some experience in the past with it, I worked in a mobile app where it's a pretty common thing to do. Facebook were probably the pioneers of feature flags. They're certainly the one that's the most well-known, I think. And it's something that you do a lot in the mobile space. But then coming over to the data-heavy IoT space, it was like worlds away. It was so very different. So it was interesting trying to find a way of getting different front-end features to customers with real data, because that was the key, that we could then test different things. We were also able to look at different deployment strategies, whereas previously we kind of had one option, which was green, blue. That was kind of it. And also wanted to be able to include some new metrics, so that then, again, if we go back, I'm going to keep on using Ravi's beaker analogy. You need to know not just is the water boiling, but what was the temperature that was boiling, so you can repeat it later. It's kind of boring if you just watch the Bunsen burner at bubbles and you say, haha, success. Like, how did it succeed? What was the reasons for that success? So we also had a big improvement on metrics services, so that then when something does succeed, we can repeat that over and over and over again. So harness, what kind of led us there, and why for us with our kind of complex deployment scenario, why were they with a partner that we chose? For us, a lot of it was because they, coming from a CI/CD space, they also understood how complex feature deliveries worked. We were able to leverage a lot of the existing features they had. Like, there's a really convenient workflow feature that sort of automates some of the metrics, so that if there's some sort of early warning that something's going wrong, or anytime someone goes on a new feature, they immediately turn off, you probably should turn that feature back off again. And you can quite easily set up workflows like that. And also integrate into I don't know, other things. Like we use Jira for feature deployments, so our QA team didn't need to learn a whole new set of tools. And then longer term, we're also going to be able to integrate with that CI/CD system, so that then when we have database deployments, it can be synchronized with front-end deployments, and everything's all nice and synchronized. Of course, until something goes wrong, but it's hopefully we at least have those kind of guardrails in place, which we felt was very important. And so yeah, for kind of super risky features, we now deploy behind a feature flag and test with a small set of users. So for example, the feature on the screen right now is our kiosk mode. We were making some changes to the way that we basically showed whether a space was safe or not due to COVID reasons. And yeah, we could just deploy to some customers who were particularly interested in the feature and had an engagement in that design process. We could say, hey, to these particular users, you get this feature turned on early. Is this what you needed? Does it work for you in your actual scenario? Because the important thing wasn't that just it worked on, my iPad when we were testing it. It was working on the iPad of the building where people were trying to see whether, it was a safe space to go in, which is a very difficult scenario to repeat without just doing it. So yeah, using feature flags, we were able to be far more confident in that feature's success. And that now it's been rolled out. I think last week we actually rolled it out with a few changes and are now doing a whole new one. So it's kind of now just become an embedded part of our process. It's improved customer interaction. It's made engineers more confident about releasing things with us, releasing things actually to the front end without, being scared about something not being quite right for a customer, or maybe it won't work with this particular piece of data. We can fairly simply turn it off with almost no risk. So I think Ravi will talk a bit more about this in a moment, but how was implementing for us? To be honest, it was very easy. We're used to integrations with our platform being pretty difficult because again, like we have lots and lots of data. Our front end is also frameworkless. So we don't have like the lovely, React SDKs or Angular. We just have jQuery. So state is sort of rammed through that front end. But Harness was one of the first things that we did. That it was actually pretty simple. Took about 6 commits and a few hundred lines of code. We've had a couple of issues, but we contacted the support team. They were very quick. And considering we're in the UK, although I think there is now some more UK support. But when we first started working with them, we were working with the US team, and it was still totally fine. So yeah, it was very, very simple. So yeah, I think now Ravi's going to talk about the journey.
Yeah, awesome, and thanks, Sam. I think that excellent overview, and also a journey at Metrikus, right? Like just for the listeners or the viewers out there, it's that it's kind of two spaces that working in. They're working in a very forward-thinking IoT space, and also it's like how do you limit or how do you get those features out to the users? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of taking it with the asterisks, right? Like part of starting your own journey is understanding a lot of the stuff actually isn't terribly new in idea, but execution is actually pretty difficult. And so the first thing I want to start with is like, okay, this might have been helpful at the beginning of the presentation, but since we gave you all, like, it's like anything, okay, we went through all the complicated stuff. Let's swirl around a little bit. Again, if I wish we had giving you the beaker with the water already boiling, right? Like, we should have told you about it a little earlier. All of this falls into this concept called progressive delivery, right? So if you kind of do any sort of cursory Googling, like, I want a feature flag or feature flag this term is going to come up. And it's kind of unpacking it here. So if you look at, let's say, your normal release process or your normal quote unquote continuous delivery, continuous deployment process, is that when you ship code, all of it is going, right? So Sam mentioned they had a blue-green strategy, like whatever the release or the feature train that was going, it was all going at the same time. But that's it, right? Like, hey, it's when taking a look at progressive delivery, you're enabling only what you need at certain times. So if we were to like really unpack this, it's yes, the entire code base is still going, but how you go about enabling the features or the methods, right? Or like, hey, do we enable this method here? Do we not enable this method? For example, with the UI changes that you were making for your customers on their kiosk devices, that's basically it, right? Like this type of, let's say, design isn't new, because you can say, oh yeah, we ran a portal site, we ran dynamic web apps for last 20 years, right? Like each user who logs in has their own experience. True. But if you take a look at what the firepower it took to do that, right? Like it was up to, the thing is with like feature flags specifically, there's like more of a standard or more of I would say a convention implementing it. So all it is, it's a conditional statement, right? If then else, if this flag is enabled, do this, else revert back to what the default would be. But understanding that over your code base, you can have tens of thousands of these conditional statements, the whole management of it becomes very difficult. I would say that, you might be implementing. So also with feature flags, it's not only for the UI, right? Like I think what's one of the great benefits of what SAM was, a lot of it actually stemmed from the mobile space, right? So like I used to get different versions of the Facebook app on my phone. I was targeted for some reason that my installation was way bigger than everybody else's installation. And I was really curious about that. And one of my buddies was like, oh, you're targeted for a dark release or a dark feature with them. And that's it, right? It came from that space. But now if you take a look at where feature flags are headed, it can be for anything. It can be for entitlements, right? So if I'm a platinum customer at Metrikus, I might get a little bit better features or UI or type of SLAs. I'm just making this up on the fly, so this might not be real at Metrikus, but it's really for us. Like we give different our SaaS platform that we have different entitlements that are actually behind the flag. So if you're a paid customer, surprise, you have more options available, and also it's boiling into infrastructure, right? And so, kind of taking a look at really what we recently released, and thanks to our friends at Metrikus, like for all their support and their feedback, we recently released a full-fledged feature flag platform. And so this means that not only are we providing you a convention-based way of, hey, if you were to try to make some sort of check if this particular feature is active or not, you can do it straight from our platform by turning things on and off. Also, there's more than just on and off, right? Feature flags allows you to do certain things like really extending A/B testing, right? So if they go to quintessential beaker of water, beaker of, I don't know, like salt water, which one will boil first, right? You could have these multivariants. Also, they can be conditional, right? Like, hey, if this feature is enabled, then this feature needs to be disabled or vice versa. There's all sorts of hierarchical relationships there. And so if you want to get started to be on the journey, like Metrikus, you can sign up. Also, I always like to talk about a presentation in a presentation. I do this sometimes. There's a lot of like scholarly items with progressive delivery. So we actually gave a presentation to the Linux Foundation in a very scholarly method that really unpacking that if you want to look at doing this for infrastructure or doing it for the middle tier or the UI or anything in between, how do you act? What are some of the pros and cons of implementing this behind a feature flag? So you can check out this Linux Foundation webinar. And then lastly, if you want to learn more or get a copy of this presentation, just give this here a scan. That would be it for I think the formal part of the presentation. And so we can have the informal part of the presentation now, where we can answer some questions and Sam and I can have a chat. And this is the rapid fire section of it. So
yeah, but this is the most fun part of the whole thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. So here's a great question. How do you secure feature flags? Can this person prevent users from turning on features themselves?
I can start. You can start, Sam.
From a kind of our perspective, it's pretty much exclusively a back of house kind of thing. The user themselves doesn't have a clue whether the feature flag is enabled unless we kind of tell them. So yeah, like it tends to be, from our perspective, it's the product team, for example, that is actually the one who are, selecting the target. So let's say I want Ravi to have the new version of the kiosk. One of the product team would have to go into the feature flags platform, find that user and then enable them through that. They don't there's no means for them to access it themselves.
Yeah, I can just take that forward. Like, if you took out, let's take back like what implementation would be like without feature flags, right? So, like, I'll talk about our harness platform. Is that a lot of our entitlements we run it in MongoDB, right? And so it's like there's database flags that would switch on and switch off, and so like to Sam's point, like, it's the kind of a backup house thing. It's your client would have to have intimate knowledge of how your software is architected, right, to toggle the feature per se. Just kind of digging into that question now, like with like, let's say front end feature flags. If you're looking at implementing one, usually you're implementing like an SDK. So it's like, let's just say you're using a React Native, or not Native, but React JS or some sort of JavaScript application, and it has to keep calling home to see if the feature's enabled. There are potentially ways to inject things, but like it's so obfuscated that they would have to have knowledge of how the application is architected. Even if it makes sense to turn the flag on or turn the flag off. I mean, by the time it hits the decision, like there's some sort of backing like database, right? Like if I just said, hey, can I get the platinum version of the application? It would take a lot. I mean, it would have even as an engineer here, it would take me a lot to kind of fake that. And so, but hey, good question. Now I might go off the rails here and ask my own questions now because I have Sam here. So don't be too worried, Sam. So this is more of an intrinsic question. That was the word I was searching for earlier, like an intrinsic question. And it's always like one like with the product management team, we kind of like bat around. You would have like an amazing answer of anybody. When do you move it? How do you decide A, like what you should flag, and then B, when do you decide to move it out of a flag to like the mainstream of the application? So like it's no longer behind a flag. It is like committed. Because we suffered from that here. We had flag sprawl. Like we had thousands of feature flags before we started consolidating them down. So just curious about your like just thought process on like when is it not a flag anymore?
Yeah, so I think actually the way that we got to feature flags was sort of, you were saying before, like how you can have sort of self-baked solutions. We kind of had one, but we called it permissions, right? I think that's what a lot of people in sort of the, heavy backend world calls what now is we use feature flags for. We'd just put a permission on it, and then you'd be given 1 or 0 in the database, and there you go. Like that does the same job. The problem is that means that you have like, off the top of my head, I think we have about 450 permission flags somewhere in the database. I don't really know exactly who has all of them. I don't really know. It'd be really difficult for us to remove them because that's a migration. Migrations are a nightmare. If you can avoid them, you do. And usually that means that, that all these permission flags just stay there. When it comes to using a feature flag platform, we actually have the option of just getting rid of it quite easily. You can just quite easily say like, right now we're targeting for kind of UI flags. We only really want them to be there for like 60 days. So usually we'll have a release a month. And after the second release, unless there's some real extenuating circumstances, as in every user hates it or we need to make some major changes, we want to roll out the new feature to everyone, because otherwise that means we've got to maintain the old feature too. And, that's engineering time. That's annoying. So we want to get it moved through as quickly as possible. So our general cadence is, like 2 cycles, which for us is about 2 months. It's actually 8 weeks, which means we have 13 cycles a year, which is really awkward. But yeah, so we try and limit it to like 60 days. But that's mainly so that, you don't get to the point where you have feature flag sprawl, because it's really hard to go back from it. So try and prevent rather than, it's really difficult to remove, I think it's one of them.
Yeah, that was very eloquent, right? Like that sums up our experience too. This is why we built the product, right? Because we were suffering. It was literally like that. There were toggles like on and off in our MongoDB like database, and the hardest thing we had was visibility from a SaaS provider standpoint. We have hundreds of customers, right? And it's like, how do we know that customer A and customer B We had ways of checking, but it was like extremely manual, and like it's
the DevOps problem, right? Rather than the product problem.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Why can the product self-serve this, right? And we try to make moves towards that, but it was painful, because even knowing like if we turn something off, like some of the features had like dependencies on them. So like if we turn this one off or on, like we had to go turn these 4 on also, or it would break, right?
The dumbest one we have, giving a little bit insight, is we actually had a permission flag, which was permission to accept terms and conditions. Which if you didn't have it, you couldn't accept the terms and conditions, so you couldn't access the product. But we couldn't remove that flag. It was like this circular conversation of, well, you have to have that flag. But then sometimes, when you needed to add, say, 80 odd permissions, you'd forget. And you're like, why is this user not working? Oh, I didn't add the key dependency. And so, yeah, trying to not do that is important.
Yeah, huge. And like I was one of the, I think, using a platform, right? Like, it's providing that type of like visibility functionality to you. You can see, I think in the product's called a multivariate feature flag, that you can see like, hey, you know what, if you enable, I'm just making this up, like, if you enable putting beer in the front of the store, well, there better be a beer feature, to kind of correspond with it. And that type of hierarchical relationship is like, you need to be on a project for years to understand that, right? Like that is like core. Like you have domain experience, product knowledge, and development experience in the product, and also this helps out like kind of like the intrinsic stuff that, hey, you know what? Part of, I think, the problem that you're solving for at Metrikus is also DX, like developer experience. That one thing we didn't touch on, we kind of left out here, was like what I have the benefit of knowing Sam a little bit. So like, it is more than one person can make that deploy, right? And so I'm going to pretend that there's 3 of us here now. So there's Sharon. So Sharon, let's pretend that Sharon is the product manager, and Sam, Sam's the architect, and I'm a developer. Like potentially Sharon could deploy the feature, right? Doesn't need to call me. I'm not sure if that was your experience. Like you were broadening the scope of number of people who can kind of make a change, or has that been your experience?
So, sorry, I missed that.
Oh yeah, no worries. Like kind of like actual implementation of it. Like part of like the allure of using a feature flag is that non-technical or like non-developmental resources can like implement a change. I'm not sure if that's kind of been like experimental.
Oh yeah, no, for us it was kind of a key thing, moving some of the responsibility. It's all that I'm very keen on, like cognitive load for people being reasonably equal, because otherwise, if let's say DevOps is I know we're on DevOps.com, so I'm preaching to the choir here, but you're responsible for so much stuff. You're responsible for, is the code working? Is the code deployed? You're also kind of responsible for, is the feature actually correct and being delivered to the customer at the right time? Because the only way we can get it there is by deploying it. That's another thing you have to worry about. Whereas if you can just kind of just be worrying a bit more about, is the product working? Is the developer experience good at getting code to production? And then once it's in production, it's now your product manager's job to be like, hey, let's release this to the customers, or let's decide which are the beta customers that we actually want to see this feature. Because if it's all hidden in database stuff, guess what? That's your DevOps person's problem. Like, so yeah, moving that, that function to the people who, they're the ones really caring about it. It's their checks that get signed when it goes right. It was important for us. Yeah,
that's huge, right? I think that was one thing that I learned. I used to be a little bit of a pessimist about about feature flags. Like, oh, why on earth would they do this? Like, we're already doing it, and that was a big thing, right? Like, hey, like, there's only so many people. Not even I have MongoDB access here. They purposely exclude me from it. They know what will happen if I had access to those databases. So, but versus like, hey, like, if there's a simple way of doing it, or a simple way of like kind of checking if there's any like raise conditions, like it's easy. So that Sharon, that was it from my side. I mean, Sam and I can talk for hours here, but people might be like, now Rob and Sam are just chit-chatting at this moment.
I can't forever, so.
I think this is fantastic. Folks, if you've got any more questions that you want to send in, go ahead and put them in now. We've got plenty of time to take those. In the meantime, though, I think I'm going to start my little wrap up and see if people can send us in a few more. Otherwise, we can give folks a couple minutes of their day back. All right. So as a reminder, this session has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it again. We will send an email with instructions for accessing it on demand, or you can always please visit us at devops.com/webinars. Amazon gift card winners, the moment we have all been waiting for. I know, I keep hoping, but I never win. All right. First winner here is William G. Congratulations, William. Second winner is Jacqueline C. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. My apologies if I am not. Congratulations to you. Emmanuel A. Congratulations to you as well. And our fourth winner is Dan W. Congratulations to all our Amazon winners. We will be sending you instructions for how to claim your gift card. If you do not see it in your inbox, please make sure and check your spam folders. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you, Ravi and Sam, so much for your awesome presentation and for joining us today. To the audience, thank you for tuning in. As always, we hope to see you again soon on another DevOps.com webinar. With that, I am Sharon Florentine, signing off.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.